In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create one of these heads-up displays as though it is being projected inside of a helmet, and I'll be using Adobe Premiere and mainly Adobe After Effects. So let's go ahead and get started. So here's my original footage. Now it looks a little bit flat gray. That's because I filmed it in a vlog mode. So I have a little bit more work that I can do in post-production with color grading. Now if you didn't shoot in vlog or anything like that, don't worry about that step. So when I filmed this, I did film this with a black background, and the only lighting I had was a couple of small LED lights, and you can see the little catch lights on my eyes. So once I have this trimmed down in Premiere, the length that I want it, then I'm just going to select it, right click, and then I'm going to choose Replace with After Effects Composition. I'm going to click that, and in a moment it's going to open up Adobe After Effects. And it's going to ask me where I want to save this. So you can save it wherever you save your work. And then I'm just going to call this tutorial. And there I have it in Adobe After Effects. Now, once it is brought in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to track this three-dimensionally. And to do that, I come over to the right side here and I click Tracker. And I'm going to choose Track Camera. And then it is going to give me this little warning. I can just click OK. I haven't applied any masks, so that doesn't matter. And it's going to take a little bit of time to analyze this and figure it out in 3D space. And that's going to allow me to create a 3D camera. Once it is finished analyzing, you're going to notice that you get all of these little track points. So what I'm going to do is kind of think about where or what plane in three-dimensional space do I want these graphics to show up. So I'm going to find something that looks like is fairly consistent with what I want it to be. So I'm going to click this one. So I've chosen those points, and then I'm going to tell it to create camera, and it's going to create a 3D camera based on those points. Create camera, and now you'll notice that I have a 3D tracking or tracker camera there. Now you can't really tell that it's there yet because I need to add a layer. So I'm going to add a text layer, and I'm going to just create some text here. So I'm going to maybe resize this. Now when you create your text, you do want to think about whatever size you want it and color. And you can kind of move it around to where you want. For this, I wanted to give it a little bit of a stroke, and you can change that color here. So I'm giving it this white stroke on the outside and red text. But it really depends on your project, what you want to do. So this is the stroke, and that is the background color or the fill color of that. Once that's done, now I need to be able to read this inside my heads-up display. So I'm going to need to flip this. So I make sure that my text layer is selected. Go to Layer, Transform, and I'm going to choose Flip Horizontal. And then it should be flipping it. Once it is flipped, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the glow effect. I'm going to come to my effects and presets, click this, and I'm just going to search for glow. And I'm going to use this stylized glow, and I drag that to my text layer. Now you can't see much happen to it just yet, but I'm going to make some adjustments. Right now the glow is based on the color channels, but I'm going to change that to alpha glow. That means it's going to glow around the alpha channel or the transparency. And I'm going to make a couple more changes. I'm going to take and I'm going to make this glow color. I can leave that white, and I'm going to come over here to my dark color, and I'm going to make that red. Still not seeing too much. I'm going to go ahead and increase that glow radius and maybe make some adjustments to my threshold and then the glow intensity. Now these numbers might be different depending upon what you desire for your particular video. And again, you can make changes as you see fit, but I think that will do for now. So it's a little bit of glowing, and I can again increase that glow radius, but we'll make some more changes as we go through. Next thing I want to do is I want to make this have somewhat of a pixelated look. I'm going to back up on that glow radius a little bit. And to do that, I'm going to come over here in my effects and presets, and I'm going to look for grid. And I'm going to get this generate grid, and I'm going to drag that to my layer. Now you'll notice that my text disappears. I'm going to fix that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change that color of my grid to black. And then I'm going to come over here on the blending mode, and I will choose multiply. Now you can kind of see it working, but it is a little bit too large. So when it says size from, I'm going to change that instead to width and height sliders. And then I can make some adjustments to this to get a little bit more of that pixelated look. And just adjust it how you see fit for your particular project. So now that I have done that, and I've got that grid, the other thing I want this thing to do is I want it to kind of flicker. To make it flicker, I'm going to come over here to this arrow, and I'm going to expand the transform, and I'm going to come to this little stopwatch here. And I'm going to hold the Alt key on a Windows or Option key on a Mac and click that stopwatch. And then it gives me this little thing that looks like coding, and I'm going to it's highlighted the text there, so I'm just going to replace the text by starting to type, and I'm going to type wiggle, parentheses, and 10, 30. And what that's going to do is it's going to cause this opacity to flicker, but it's going to do it somewhat random looking. And I don't need to hit enter. I just go ahead, click to the side, and then when I play that, you'll notice that it flickers. So now that that is set, that little flicker effect, that'll come into play a little bit later. The next thing I need to do is I need to pre-compose this, because I really want that grid to move around with it in three-dimensional space. And the only way that's going to happen is if I do this thing called Precompose. So I right-click this text layer, and I'm going to choose Precompose. And then it asks me what I want to save it as or name it. I'm just going to leave it as that for now. And then there it is flickering, and you'll notice that the bar has changed color because now it is a pre-composed piece of video. It just means it took all of that stuff and mashed it together, and it's treating it as one solid piece of video with the effects added to it. Next thing I want to do is I want to switch the blending mode to this layer. So I'm going to come to the bottom here where it says modes, and I'm going to click that just so I can access this. And I'm going to choose the blending mode of add. And then it kind of brightens it up a little bit. Next thing I will do is I'm going to go to this transform, and now I'm going to click this opacity. I'm not going to do the clock for this one. I'm just going to take this opacity down to 90%. Now it's not only going to be flickering, but it's somewhat transparent. So you can kind of see that over here behind. You can see my ear behind that a little bit. So it makes it a little bit transparent, and I think that's going to help. Now, once I have done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in three-dimensional space. So that button I clicked earlier for the modes, I'm going to bring up another view here, and I want to make this a three-dimensional layer. And I'm going to click this little 3D layer thing here. And I click that. Now it looks like my text disappeared. It didn't. What it did is it just moved in three-dimensional space based on that tracking earlier. So I zoomed out using my mouse with the mouse wheel, and I'm going to take that, I'm going to move it in closer now to my face. So now as I move, you'll notice that is tracking with me. I'll zoom in a little bit more, and then what I can do is I can move this in three-dimensional space. I can move it in Y, I can move it in Z, or I can hover over here and move it in X. So you want to find that spot where it looks like it works well for your particular project. But the other thing I want to do for this is not only move it in Z space, I want to rotate it a little bit. So I'm going to rotate it on the Y to give it a little bit of an angle. And then I'm going to move it over here because I want to see what that looks like. So you should take a little bit of time to kind of move it and adjust it in three-dimensional space. You'll notice that when you move it in Z space, it can get larger as it gets closer to that three-dimensional camera, or smaller as it gets further away. So you're gonna have to kind of make your adjustments based on your particular project. So I have this kind of moving around in Z space, and I've done a little bit of rotation to it. And maybe that works for that particular one. So next thing I want to do is, after that is moved, I'm going to select this layer, and I'm going to do a Control D on a Windows or Command D on a Mac. And now I have two of them. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this other one that I just duplicated, and I'm going to move that around in X, Y, and Z space to make it look as though there are two of them. And again, I'm going to do a little bit of rotation, and then I'm going to move it in my Z space and my X space, and see, well, what would it look like if there were two of these things floating around inside the helmet. Just move that around a little bit. And again, with your particular project, it's going to depend how many you want to do and where you want it. So after you've kind of adjusted it to where you want, then you want to scrub through that and just make sure that it looks good in 3 dimensions. So make whatever adjustments necessary. And then you can just kind of grab these and move it around so that it is working in 3-dimensional space. And it is almost finished. So after you have done that, the next thing I want to do is I want to mask this background layer a little bit, and I'm going to make some adjustments to the color. So I'm going to get my masked tool, and you're going to find that up here. It's also a shape tool, but I'm going to choose this ellipse tool. And then you'll notice that the tool has this square with a circle in it. That is because it is the mask tool. Now, if I click off of this, it becomes the shape tool, and it would create a shape. So you don't want to make that mistake. You want to make sure that you select the layer that you want to mask, and then I'm just going to click and drag and create this ellipse, and then I'm going to make some adjustments to that mask. So I'm going to come over here to the mask, and I'm going to feather that mask, make it a little bit softer, and I'm also going to expand the mask and make it larger. And that looks pretty good for this for right now. After I've done that, I'm going to make some changes with the color of this. Now to do that, I'm going to again select that background layer. I'm going to come over to my effects and presets, and I'm going to look for the color correction called Lumetri. And I'm going to grab that Lumetri color, and I'm going to drag it to my background layer. Now, I did mention earlier that I filmed this in a vlog mode. That's why it looks gray like that. And I'm going to apply what's called a lookup table. Now, if you didn't film in log, then it doesn't matter. You don't need to do this step. I'm just going to browse for my particular lookup table that'll make that look a little bit more color realistic. Now I've applied the lookup table, and then I'm going to make a few more adjustments. So you can adjust the exposure how you see fit. Or you can adjust your contrast or your highlights. Or you can also apply one of these creative effects. So perhaps I might just try this speed look, this big one. Now it looks a little bit on the blue end and kind of punchy. So I can make some adjustments to it. And again, it depends on yours. Next thing I want to do is I want to adjust the color of this. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to grab my shadow tint. I'm going to be tinting my shadows a little bit on the red side, and then my highlights a little also on the red side. Again, for your particular clip, then it depends on how you want it to look. But getting a little bit better. So after I've adjusted my color, then I am going to add a little bit more of a glow here to these layers. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my effects and presets, and I'm going to type glow. And I'm going to be glowing this one more time. So I'm going to go to this top one here. Now you'll notice it looks like it's glowing a little bit more. I'm going to increase that glow radius. And that glow intensity. And again, as you experiment with it, then you can kind of find what looks right for your particular project. So once I've done it to one of these, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to do a Command C on a Mac or Control C on Windows, and I'm going to select that glow, and I'm going to go to my other layer, and then I'm going to do a Command V or a Control V, and now that glow is added to both layers. So next thing I want to do is I want to add just a little bit of glow to my face, and this is the last step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and I'm going to grab a glow. I'm going to do that one more time. And I'm going to grab the glow and I'm going to drag it to this background layer. Now you'll notice that it looks kind of weird and shiny, but that's okay. I'm going to make some adjustments to that. So to make things look a little cleaner, I'm going to collapse these things by clicking those arrows, and then I can make some adjustments to my glow. So right now I'm glowing on the color channels, and then I can make some adjustments to things like this radius and the threshold. So does not look good right there, but then I can make some adjustments, and it starts to look a little bit fuzzy, and I can adjust that again. And maybe I'm going to take this glow threshold for this particular project. I'm going to maybe take that to about 30 or so, and then that radius, I can increase that radius. If it's too small, then you can see what it looks like there, but I'm going to increase that radius. Now it's pretty close. It does not look the right color though. Notice that it looks kind of white there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to here on this color A, and I'm going to choose red. And then I can make a few further adjustments. So now when I scroll through, you can see it looks as though this is kind of illuminating the side of my face as I turn my head. And if it looks like it's a little bit too bright, then just go ahead and make some adjustments perhaps to that glow radius, either increase or decrease the glow radius, and then I can adjust that glow threshold. And I'm going to click off so I don't see that mask. So now for the very last step of this is I'm going to make it look even more three-dimensional, because right now this looks very flat. So in order to fix that, I'm going to add a little bit of a curvature to it. In order to do that, I need to change the renderer. So I'm going to come over here to this 3D layer, and in here where you can see that it says geometry options, it's grayed out. If I click this change renderer, then it gives me an option to change it. Right now I'm using the classic 3D. I'm going to choose Cinema 4D, and then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Give it a moment, and the next thing I'm going to do is adjust the curvature of this. So under these geometry options, I can actually adjust this curvature. So I'm going to take that curvature and I'm going to put it maybe about -50 or so, and I'm going to scrub through that, and now you can take a look at that. It looks like it is rounded. So that's going to really sell that effect that it's inside a helmet. So I did it to that top layer, and I'm going to do it also to the bottom one. So under my geometry options, I'm going to drop that curvature to -50, and then that should look pretty good. So as I rotate my head around, it looks as though it is kind of tracking with me, and it is in three-dimensional space. You see a little bit of that as it covers over, and there's a little bit of parallax to it. So that's how you can create a heads-up display using Adobe After Effects.